I used to think to myself, woe is me, look how hard my life was. And now maybe it's just like the fact of getting older as well. I actually see it as the opposite. I was blessed to have the kind of difficulty. I had both boundary conditions work in my favor. One was being an immigrant, which caused me to feel like an outsider. And the second was because sort of societally, the issues that we were dealing with, poverty and some mental health issues in my family and, alcoholism, etc., that made me an outsider. In hindsight, what a blessing. I couldn't do anything but go up from where I mean, the bar was so low. So that's what I try to, tell a lot of people about why all of these things are important. Immigration is important for that reason. A social safety net is important for all of these things. It allows you the best likelihood of having people with boundary conditions that can motivate them and pull them forward, but not make those boundary conditions so crazy that they just hold you back. If I could give you another random thought, what I would say is the reason why America does so well at pulling people into its country and allowing them to thrive is that America treats capitalism and democracy as these two very sacrosanct elements of our founding. So if you go all the way back to the 1700s and you think about what the basis of democracy was, it was all around economics and entrepreneurship. The Boston Tea Party was around taxation. These things were like seminally built into the American core. And the thing about capitalism is that it makes very clear the distinction between families and teams. And America has always been, let's field the best team, right? So when you're at the office, it's about a team. When you go home, that's your family. And America got that really, really right. I didn't exactly know where I was going necessarily, but I felt an urgency around the things that I did. So a different way to say this was, I knew that I had some raw potential. I didn't exactly know where and how I could put that best to work. And so I learned to be very experimental. So, it didn't matter the different kinds of jobs I had. My commitment was, in this moment, I'm going to try to be the best version of this person and achieve, however the metric was. When I was in my early 20s, I had this incredibly lucky thing happen to me. I had been trading stocks on the side, and my boss at the time, who I had all of a sudden made a lot of money for, said to me, and I've said this story before, but I love telling it. My nickname on the trading desk was Sherman. Nobody wanted to say Chamath, so they called me Sherman. I said, Sherman, how much debt do you have? And I said, I have like $27,000 of debt. And he wrote me a check and he said, you go and you pay this debt off right now. And I walked downstairs and I paid it off. And I came back upstairs and he said, that's the value of equity. And it lifted a burden from me. And during that time, even until my early 30s, every paycheck I got, a third to a half would always go back to my family. And so, I was always kind of running uphill, right? So I never really could live my station in life. When I made 50,000 a year, I was like making 25. When I made 100, it was like I was making 50. When I made 200,000 a year, it was like I was making 100 constantly. And then I got this job offer to go work at this small startup company in California called Winamp. And it had just been bought by AOL. And they had given me a number of shares as my comp package. So my salary was a lot less, but then it was like 5,000 shares. I mean, like a complete nothing burger, okay? But I went back and I built a spreadsheet and I sensitized how much money would this have been had I joined in different years. And Trey, there was a couple scenarios where it would have been like $3 million or $4 million. And I was like, what is this? And I didn't even realize that even when I was trading stocks, that I was actually buying pieces of companies and that equity would create wealth. So that's how I learned it. I joined that company. I took the 5,000 shares. The stock price went in half. I made nothing from it, but I committed myself to being good. And, over time, I was able to negotiate when I went to Facebook that concept. And I remember Mark and I negotiating my comp package. And I said, I'm optimizing for ownership. Give me all the number of ways that I can make money via equity at Facebook. And one way was I remember he gave me, I'm gonna get this wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is right, 25 basis points of equity for hiring 3 director level employees. I was a VP, I was in the senior management team. And somewhere along the way, I just decided I don't want to hire directors because these guys are all bozos and I'd rather recruit from within and promote up. And so then I went back to him and I said, well, let's just tie it to users. Anyways, those were like billion-dollar decisions, which weren't billion-dollar decisions at the time. They turned out to be those things. But it was all tied back to that one moment where, my boss, Mike Fisher, said, Sherman, go pay off your debt. I think like investing is 3 things, right? There's like the first part, which is like the nuts and bolts, right? Meaning like the ones and zeros, being able to do the simple math. Okay. Then there is sort of like this part, which is what are your biases telling you about the ones and zeros? And then there's judgment, when to listen to your biases, when to ignore them, and then how to size. And the great investors, I think, sum those 3 things together. And it's a constant, very complicated equation that's running through their minds. This is why, investing is a very individual tradecraft, because it's an impossible thing to document, right? I don't think Stan Druckenmiller or David Tepper's process is largely documentable. They could tell you till kingdom come how they did something in the past, but it will not inform how they'll make a decision in the future. Stevie Cohen, just add to the list of all the greats. Buffett. And so I think it's very important to realize that. And the ones and zeros were very hard to unpack. And the reason was because Jeff didn't generate a ton of free cash flow at the time. And then instead, what I said was like, look, let's assume that Jeff is a PM inside of a hedge fund and Amazon is actually a hedge fund. Why don't we calculate what his actual IRRs are, right? What's his return on invested capital? And there's a very famous slide in that presentation, which I love to this day, where what we did was we took the P&L and we looked at every single expense line. And we were able to show that how it systematically over years migrated to the revenue line. How much they spend on payments became Amazon payments. How much they spent on content became Kindle and Prime Video and a bunch of other things, on and on down the line. Compute became AWS. And then all of a sudden, at scales of billions of dollars of invested capital, Jeff had a 44% IRR. And so now all of a sudden my biases didn't matter. It was all about sizing. And so it's just to give you a sense that there's the P&L view. Then there's that next level of numerical judgment. And then there's your kind of innate idiosyncratic way of looking at that data to come to a conclusion. So I do a lot of it. I know when to double down and listen to it. And I know sometimes to look around the corner and then sometimes when to just ignore it.